I am always reporting live from the front line of some random football story somewhere. Although sometimes I do stories that don't have anything to do with football or soccer. But most of the time, we're on the front lines reporting about something. And I have identified a particularly intriguing something. You see, part of the reason that I don't know if this is true for you guys. Part of the reason that I enjoy watching football so much, like obviously you have your team that you root for, right? And then you have maybe your national team that you enjoy rooting for, and then you watch the big matches like the World Cup final and the Champions League knockouts and the FA Cup final or the Copa del Rey final, or just it happens to be a nice Der Klassiker or El Clasico or whatever, right? And then if you really get into the sport enough, you start watching this story's interesting match. You all of a sudden end up watching San Marino. Great example. San Marino, when they finally go beat Liechtenstein, you go watch that match because you're in touch with everything. Or maybe now you go watch the Polish league. You're like, well, shoot. The Polish league is so ridiculously close. It's so unbelievably interesting. That's what I'm going to tune in against. And then if you're really into this channel, you all of a sudden end up watching the Mongolian Premier League to watch a team that started the season with a minus 119 goal difference avoid relegation. These are the kind of things that make you fall in love with the sport, really. That is something that on the main channel that I pretend to have, I try to go and travel around the world and make videos about these sorts of stories, whether it's the Faroese team that makes the Conference League group stage or the Marshall Islands national team that's starting its journey, playing its first ever match and having its first ever call up and everything, which I went and attended, and that's the next Hidden Grounds that's going to come out, again, because I'm LARPing New Zealand. Or perhaps it's what's happening in Switzerland. Because I believe, I make these executive decisions about when it's time for me to pull the ripcord, to ring the alarm bells, right? And I made the decision with Poland that, okay, we're more than halfway through the season. The league is still ridiculously close. It is time to discuss, all things Poland, all things that have 5 W's in their last name, right? And then with Switzerland, it is now officially time, in my estimation, to discuss FC Thun, the city at Thun. Because after 21 matches, FC Thun is top of the league by 7 points. Now, if you're not particularly familiar with the Swiss league, this doesn't immediately jump off the page to you. But if you look through this league and you're a ball knower, you'll recognize some names. Lugano, who's in second and has won at least the last 5 matches they've played, has been a pretty regular presence in Europe over the last couple of years. If you're keeping track of the Europa League, if you're keeping track of the Conference League, you're seeing the name Lugano. Basel, of course, at times has been a very big team out of Switzerland. Young Boys has been in the Champions League multiple times recently. They're down in 6th. Lausanne Sport as well has been a regular presence in European group stages. And Servette has made multiple European knockouts over the last couple of years. They're all the way down in 9th. But a name you don't recognize is FC Thun. And the reason that you don't recognize them is if I take this back to last year, which is apparently not a functionality afforded by Google. So let's see how quick this... let's see how quickly I can get this done. FC Thun standings. And then we have the league. And then I don't believe I can take this back to last year. Oh, no. 2025 Swiss League final table. Here we go, baby. That's what I'm talking about. So they play 38 matches. 33 in the normal league stage. And then, it's one of those leagues like Scotland, it splits in half, and then you play every other team one more time after it splits. Smaller country, right? You only have 12 teams in the top league, but you want to be able to get to 38 matches, and that's how you're able to get to 38 matches. You'll notice that in looking through this, FC Thun is not here. That is because out of all of the teams that are in this league, one of them had to leave. Yverdon, and the one team, the only team, and I find this to be particularly remarkable, that gets promoted is FC Thun. There's not multiple teams going back and forth. It is one spot. Second spot in a playoff that Grasshoppers won. Obviously, the top flight team is going to be favored in that situation. Grasshoppers wins the playoff, and so Yverdon goes down. FC Thun comes up. On 39 points, by the way, so pretty decent parity going on. I guess maybe you could argue that means there's some sort of bottleneck in the league below that allows FC Thun to build itself up into a juggernaut but they spent 5 years in the wilderness. This is not a team that bounced down via a close playoff and then managed to bounce right back up. They spent 5 years down in the second division of Switzerland doing absolutely nothing of note. Then we can see if we use this transfer mark tool here. They got relegated here. They then, second, fifth, sixth, second, and then finally won the league to bounce back up in the first place. Before that, they had a spell of about a decade in the top flight. Before that, they were down a little bit and then back up. But in that decade in the top flight, they finished largely lower half of the table. They were never a team that actually managed to go out and compete in Europe. And in fact, according to a further investigation that I've conducted, very important historical investigation, they played Champions League group stage in 2005. So if you're like an older football fan, right, a bit of an old head, particularly watching this type of video, you might recognize the name FC Thun from a Champions League group stage they made 20 years ago. But they have largely been completely off the map. And recently, they managed to win their 15th match in 21 matches. Now, I am always particularly impressed with this sort of thing because FC Thun, obviously only having one draw helps. Winning 15 out of 21 matches is a league-winning clip. This is not a run by FC Thun that is supported by the rest of the league sucking. Like the team that's at the top of the Polish league where they've only won 7 of their 18 matches, but they're in first because the entire league is having some sort of nuclear meltdown. FC Thun fully deserves this. They fully deserve this, and in their last match, they destroyed a very recognizable brand in Swiss football. They did it entirely in the second half. In fact, running it up 3-0 in less than 20 minutes. I mean, if you look at the statistics from the match, did they deserve that? Who cares? If you can bag somebody up 3-0 inside 20 minutes, then I feel like the goals themselves, they speak for themselves. Okay, your XG isn't necessarily going to tell you the full story of how FC Thun actually managed to go out and get this. And look at what it meant to the fans. I mean, this is the fan support for a club that was been in the second division of Switzerland for 5 years. This is the celebration after the game. Because this match was important, by the way. I managed to get up a map of all of the teams in Switzerland. This is Thun's rivalry, right? This is Sunderland returning to the Premier League and smacking Newcastle around. That's what's happening here. Right, Thun has come back into the league. They're going up against a team that's won a ton of Swiss titles recently. And did I mention FC Thun's never won? Not even going back through the last 20 years. You go back through their entire history, FC Thun has never won the top league of Switzerland. And they have watched their neighbor, their hated rival, do this consistently. Right, in fact, the year that FC Thun got relegated, Young Boys was winning its 3rd consecutive league title. And now FC Thun has bounced back into the top league, and they've bomba-clotted Young Boys 4-1, and this is what it meant to the fans. Great support. Now, it just seems like, and I love this, it seems like the sports world has been taken over by sports stories of teams that are having these kinds of runs that their fans could have only dreamed of. These, once in a lifetime, quote unquote, type of runs, whether it's Indiana football and college football, these guys here, right? There's a good number of teams that are taking runs like this. I think there's one going on in Belgium as well. But it doesn't take away how special each individual one is. Even though it feels like to me now, I'm like, I've watched the same story 4 or 5 times. We've got this team that's coming out of absolutely nowhere that looks like they might actually be able to get it. I mean, it even started with Mjällby in Sweden. Like maybe this is just a trend in football that clubs that are really run well, that are putting their shit together in the right way, right? The puzzle pieces are fitting perfectly. That in modern football, those clubs are able to do things that they really previously couldn't have imagined. Through all of these different, leagues across Europe, all of these different mid-leagues across Europe, Sweden to Belgium to Switzerland, whatever, to Poland, they're putting things together that previously did not fit together, and they're pulling things off that previously were not possible to pull off. Maybe it's some sort of effect of FFP too. I don't know. Maybe FFP has something to do with it. But I am incredibly happy for these fans. And I'm incredibly happy for SC Thun. And they've got 17 matches left to try to see this out. But it's time to sound the alarm that there is a team playing brilliant football, beating Champions League stage type teams 4-1, that is trying to claim a title they have never claimed before in one of the top 15 leagues in Europe. Ring the bells! Upset alert.